Chapter 20, Gregor the Overlander. It was just the 9 of them now. Gregor felt like all the grown-ups had gone home and left the kids with a rat for a babysitter. Inside he felt sick and hollow and very young. He looked around the group and realized there was no one he could turn to for protection. "We may as well get some rest," said Rip Red with a big yawn. "Start fresh in a few hours." He brushed some cheese crumbs off his fur, curled up in a ball, and was snoring loudly within a minute. No one else knew what to say. Gregor spread his blanket on the floor and called Boots over. "Go bye-bye?" asked Boots, pointing in the direction Vicus had departed. "They went bye-bye, Boots. We're going to sleep here. Betty-bye time." He lay down on the blanket, and she curled up with him without protest. Temp and Tick had positioned themselves on either side of them. Were they standing guard? Did they really think there was anything they could do if Rip Red decided to attack them? Still, it was kind of comforting to have them there. Luxa refused to lie down. Aurora came and wrapped her golden wings around her. Ares pressed his black furry back against Aurora's, and Henry lay at his feet. They could take whatever precautions they wanted to, but Gregor felt Rip Red could kill all 8 of them in a flash. He'll take out Henry and Luxa first, since they're the only 2 with weapons, and then just pick off the rest of us one by one, thought Gregor. Maybe Ares or Aurora could escape, but the rest of them were sitting ducks. That was the truth. He might as well accept it. Oddly enough, once he accepted it, Gregor felt more relaxed. He didn't have any choice but to trust Rip Red. If he could trust Rip Red, then he could go to sleep. So he let himself drift off, trying to push the images of striped spider legs and jagged rat teeth from his brain. What a rotten day it had been. He awoke with a start to loud slapping sound. He instinctively crouched over Boots until he realized it was just Rip Red smacking his tail against the ground. Come on, he growled. "Time to get moving. Feed yourself. Let's go." Gregor crawled from under his blanket and waited for Merith to get the food. Then he remembered that Merith was gone. "How do you want to handle this food thing?" he asked Henry. "Luxa and I do not serve food. We are royalty," said Henry haughtily. "Yeah, well, I'm the warrior, and Boots is a princess. And you 2 are going to get pretty hungry if you're waiting for me to serve you," said Gregor. He was way over this royalty thing. Rip Red laughed. "Tell him, boy. Tell him your country fought a war so you wouldn't have to answer to kings and queens." Gregor looked at Rip Red in surprise. "How do you know that?" "Oh, I know a great many things about the Overland that our friends here do not. I have spent much time there among your books and papers," said Rip Red. "You can read?" asked Gregor. "Most rats read. Our frustration is we cannot hold a pen to write." "Now move, Overlander. Eat, don't eat, but let's go," ordered Rip Red. Gregor went to the packs of food to check out the supplies. It was mostly smoked meat, bread, and those sweet potato things. He guessed they might have enough food for 3 days if they were careful. Of course, Rip Red ate like a pig, and he would probably expect them to feed him. So, okay, maybe 2 days. Luxa came over and sat awkwardly at his side. "What?" Gregor said. "How do we make this food?" she asked. "What do you mean?" "Henry and I, we have never actually prepared food." Gregor could see Henry scowling at Luxa, but she did not look at him. "You mean you never even made yourself a snack? Or a sandwich?" asked Gregor. He couldn't cook much, but if his mom had to work late, he'd make dinner sometimes. Just stuff like scrambled eggs or macaroni and cheese. But he could get by. "A sandwich? Is this a dish named in honor of Bartholomew of Sandwich?" she said, puzzled. Gregor said, "I don't really know. It's 2 slices of bread with meat or cheese or peanut butter or something between them." "I have not made a sandwich," said Luxa. "It's not hard. Here, slice off some pieces of meat, not too thick," he said, handing her a knife. Gregor sawed away at the bread, managing to get 18 slices out of 1 loaf. Luxa did a pretty good job with the meat, but then she was used to handling blades. He showed her how to assemble the sandwiches, and she seemed somewhat pleased with her accomplishment. She took 4 for herself, her cousin, and the bats. Gregor took the other 5. It would be asking too much of her to serve Rip Red and the roaches. He roused Boots, and she started right in on her sandwich. Temp and Tick gave polite nods of thanks for theirs. Then Gregor approached Rip Red, who was leaning sulkily in the tunnel. He held out a sandwich. "Here," he said. "For me?" said Rip Red, with exaggerated surprise. "How very thoughtful of you. I'm sure the rest of your party would be happy to see me starve." "If you starve, I'll never find my dad," said Gregor. "Quite true," said Rip Red, popping the entire sandwich in his mouth. "It's good we have this understanding. Mutual need is a strong bond. Stronger than friendship, stronger than love." "Do rats love?" Gregor said dryly. "Oh, yes," said Rip Red with a smirk. "We love ourselves very much." Figures, thought Gregor. He went and sat with Boots, who was polishing off her sandwich. "More," said Boots, pointing at Gregor's uneaten sandwich. He was ravenous, but he couldn't let her go hungry. He started to break his sandwich in half when Temp delicately pushed his sandwich in front of Boots. "The princess may eat mine," said Temp. "You need to eat too, Temp," objected Gregor. "Not much," said Gregor. "Tick will share her food with me." "Her food? Ah, so Tick must be a girl roach." "He will share with me," said Tick. And Temp was a guy. Not that it made any difference to Gregor. It was just one more way he could avoid insulting the bugs. Since Boots had already munched halfway through Temp's sandwich, Gregor accepted. He tried to give them part of his food at the next meal. Breakfast was finished in 2 minutes, and they packed up. They were starting to mount Aries and Aurora when Rip Red stopped them. "Don't bother. You can't fly where we go," he said, and indicated the tunnel. It was barely 6 feet high and only a few feet wide. "We're going in there? Isn't there another way to get my dad?" said Gregor. He didn't want to head into the dark, narrow space with Rip Red, even if they had a mutual need. "There is another way, but not a better way, unless you know one," said Rip Red. Gregor could feel Aries and Aurora twitching in distress. "What about the bats?" "I'm sure you'll work that out," drawled Rip Red. "Can you walk?" Gregor asked Aries. "Not long, not far," said Aries. "Then we'll have to carry you," said Gregor. "Ride you, flyers, ride you?" asked Temp. "Flyers do not ride crawlers," said Aurora edgily. "Why not?" "They rode on you," said Gregor. He was tired of everybody being snooty to the roaches. They never complained, they pulled their own weight, and they looked after Boots. All in all, the bugs were the easiest traveling companions. The bats fluttered but didn't answer. "Well, I'm not carrying you. I've already got Boots and a pack of pot roast, and Luxa and Henry can carry you both. So if you're and can't carry you both. So if you're too good to ride on the crawlers, I guess you better ask Rip Red for a lift." "Do not use that tone with them," snapped Luxa. "They do not sneer at the crawlers. It is the smallness of the tunnel. Flyers do not like a place they cannot spread their wings." "Yeah, well, half of us haven't been having much fun flying hundreds of feet in the air either," said Gregor. He realized he was beginning to sound like a jerk. Aries and Aurora had not been mean or impatient when he and the roaches were scared of flying. "Look, I know it'll be hard, but I'm sure the whole trip won't be in such small tunnels, right, Rip Red?" "Oh, surely not the whole trip," said Rip Red, bored to pieces by the argument. "Can we start, please? The war will be over before we decide our travel plans." "We will ride with the crawlers," said Aries shortly. Gregor helped Luxa and Henry set the bats on the roach's back. They had to lie face down and cling to the smooth shells with their claws. Gregor had to admit it looked like an uncomfortable way to travel. He tucked Boots in the backpack and picked up his share of the food. Okay, lead the way, he said to Rip Red. Finally, Rip Red said, and slid into the black hole of the tunnel. Henry followed next with a torch and a drawn sword. Gregor guessed he was trying to give the bats some feeling of protection. They went next, single file, on the roaches. Gregor waited for Luxa to enter the tunnel, but she shook her head. No, Overlander, I think it's best that I cover our backs. Probably, said Gregor, realizing he still didn't have a sword. He went into the tunnel, giving Boots the flashlight to hold. Luxa brought up the rear. It was awful, cramped and airless, with some foul liquid that smelled like rotten eggs dripping from the ceiling. The bats were stiff with discomfort, but the crawlers seemed at home. Ick, said Boots as a drop of liquid landed on Gregor's hard hat. Icky. Yeah, icky, agreed Gregor. He hoped the tunnel wasn't long. You could go crazy pretty fast in here. He turned back to check on Luxa. She didn't look happy, but she was managing. What means this icky? She asked him. Icky, yucky, gross, nasty, foul, said Gregor. Yeah, that describes well the rat's land, said Luxa with a sniff. Hey, Luxa, he said, how come you were surprised when Rip Red showed up? I mean, I don't really know the prophecy, but you do. Didn't you expect a rat? No, I thought one door beside meant a rat would be tracking us, perhaps even chasing us. I never imagined he would be part of the quest. She said. Vicus said we can trust him, said Gregor. Vicus says many things, said Luxa. She sounded so angry that Gregor decided to let the conversation drop. They trudged on for a while in silence. From the periodic splashes on his face, Gregor knew that Boots must be getting wet. He tried to put his hard hat on her, but it kept slipping off. Finally, he dug out some catchcloths and tied them on Boots' head. The last thing they needed was for her to catch cold. After several dismal hours, everyone was soaked and miserable. Rip Red led them into a small cavern. The smelly water ran down along the sides of the place like rain. The bats were so stiff that Luxa and Henry had to lift them off the roaches and help straighten out their wings. Rip Red lifted his nose in the air and took a deep sniff. There. That has done much to conceal your odor, he said with satisfaction. You mean you just took us this way so we'd all smell like rotten eggs? Said Gregor. Quite necessary. As a pack, you were highly repugnant. Gregor was too worn out to argue. He and Luxa opened up the packs and doled out the food. No one felt like talking. Rip Red swallowed his lunch in a gulp and stood in the entrance to the tunnel. They were just finishing up when the bats went tense. Spinners, warned Aurora. Yes, they've been on our trail almost since we started our journey. I cannot smell how many in this place with all the water. What can they want? I wonder. Rip Red flicked his tail as Luxa and Henry gave an order. 3-point arc, you two. Luxa and Henry exchanged the look and didn't move. 3-point arc, and this is no time to test my authority, pups. Henry and Luxa reluctantly took places on either side of Rip Red, but back a few feet. The three formed a small arc between the rest of the party and the tunnel entrance. The bats took positions behind them. Gregor strained his ears, but all he could hear was the water falling. Was there an army of spiders after them? He felt, as usual, unarmed and defenseless. He didn't even have a root beer this time. Everyone became motionless. Gregor could tell that Temp and Tick sensed the invaders now, too. Boots solemnly sucked on a cookie, but didn't make a sound. Gregor could see the muscles rippling in anticipation along Rip Red's broad back as the spinners approached. He braced himself for a wave of bloodthirsty spiders, but it never came. A large orange spider, with a small brown spider on its back, staggered in and collapsed on the floor. The brown one was oozing a strange blue liquid. It made a great effort to sit up. Its front legs brushed its chest as it spoke. Vicus sends us. Gnawers attack webs. many spinners lost. We too, we joined the quest. And with that, the brown spider fell over dead. The end of chapter 20.